Welcome to our masterclass on 3D socks creation. In this video, we'll be walking you through the process of creating, materializing, and designing socks in VStitcher. That way you can achieve a complete look for your avatar. We'll also provide you with some useful tips and tricks along the way so you can enjoy quick and easy socks creation workflow. Let's begin the process by importing a DXF file that we have exported from a 2D CAD system into VStitcher. Socks are normally seamless. Since we are not able to create seamless garments in VStitcher, we ensure that the patterns are split in different parts like this. We will be creating only one side of the sock for this demo. Here, the pattern for the sock consists of 3 pieces: the band, the heel, and the foot. If we are working with both pairs, it is important to ensure that the inner symmetry of the patterns is cancelled first before creating X symmetry for the other side of the sock. Next, we want to add some internal lines and save them as rulers on the patterns. These internal lines and rulers can be useful as 3D guide marks when we are dressing the socks on the avatar and if we need to check the spec measurements later on. We add the internal lines using the pen tool on the center of the patterns like this. We save them as rulers. Now that we have prepared the patterns, we will need to load the correct avatar in the 3D window. We will use Oliver for this example. If we do not have the foot avatar we need, we can edit the parametric avatar's measurements to match the foot measurements we need. For easy navigation, we can also save a 3D view. This can also be useful when we want to render the socks when we're done. On the avatar, we want to use the 3D measurement tool and add some measurements. This is so we can use them as guidelines and match them with internal lines on the socks when we dress them. Some 3D measurements that would be best to have on the avatar: foot length and width, ankle circumference, mid-calf circumference, side seam, center front, and center back. We can ensure that always shown is checked so that the measurements will still show on the avatar when we dress the socks. Next, we need to arrange our patterns in clusters. When arranging socks, there is not one way to do so. We can play around with the clusters and cluster wrap types available to achieve the most optimal prepare positions for all the sock patterns. For example, we do not have to put the patterns into the foot cluster as it has less wrap types that would work for this pattern. So instead, we could use the leg cluster and maneuver the patterns to the position we need. You will need to experiment with this when arranging different types of socks. Once we are done, we will stitch the patterns. Then allow the sock to simulate on the avatar. We can see that the socks will collide with the toes of the avatar. To avoid this, we can lower the grid size of the patterns. Let's lower it to 0.5. This helps refine the simulation of the sock. While we dress the socks, we can use the 3D view we have created to review the garment as laying on the avatar correctly. To help us, we can ensure the internal lines we have added are visible in 3D, and so we can match up the lines to the 3D guides we have created. With our styling tools, we will style the sock in place. We can also use the hold function to keep the styling in place when working on the other. Almost done. The last step is for us to create a faux seamless effect. To do this, we will change the stitch construction for all the edges that are stitched to the flat seam. You can now see that the seams are no longer visible, and it looks like the sock is made up of one seamless pattern. Once we have a block, we can now move on to apply materials to our socks. Here we have added some materials as required for this sock, and have changed their colors as needed. We have the option to download some of the fabrics from the Browseware Cloud library, or we can import our own fabrics that we have scanned and tested. Since this sock is a seamless garment, it will require different fabrics to be applied to different sections of the sock. We have our tech pack here, which states the different areas of the sock and the specification for the colors and fabrics. We will use the Cut Marks feature to section the socks into different parts. We first add the tech pack as an artwork in VStitcher. Then we create a rectangle in the 2D window and assign the tech pack image to the rectangle. We'll be using this as a reference for the calf portion of the sock design. We must make the image true to size. If it is not, we can use the gizmo or image editor to edit the size of the image. Next, we will lock the artwork so that we can trace over it easily. We can add a rectangle first for the outline of the pattern. Then we use the pen tool and trace over the design lines. We use the extract tool and extract the pattern. The next step is to copy over the internal lines to the sock pattern. We align the new pattern on top, then marquee select the internal lines. Then we convert the internal to floating lines, and convert the floating lines back to internal lines. Let's remove the pattern from the 3D window by unchecking Use in 3D and hiding it from the 2D window to avoid any confusion. Select all the internal lines and convert them to cut marks. We drag and drop the different fabrics into sections on the sock and apply fabrics to the rest of the patterns. For seamless garments, we also want to remove the thickness of all the fabrics so that we would not see any indentation when the garment transitions from one section to another. Here's a note. When working with seamless garments, the physics of the fabrics you have applied onto the different sections using this method are not supported. This method is great if you just want to play around with the designs of the cut marks. To allow the physics of these different fabrics to be supported in the simulation, we will need to create closed cut marks using the pen tool. We have two ways to do this. First is by using the pen tool and enabling point, edge, and trace. Then with edit points enabled, we can continue drawing from the existing lines and draw out each section. A quicker way to do this is by using the divide and trace as internal line feature. We bring back the pattern that we have created previously in the 2D window. Next, we change all internal lines to cut marks. We click on the pattern and click Divide in the context view. Now all the sections are split up into different parts. Before we move on to the next step, we can remove all the existing lines on the original sock pattern if there are any. We marquee select the patterns we have divided, then drag them over to the original pattern and align them. Next, multi-select only the top patterns. Go to the line on the context view and select Trace as internal line. We delete all divided pieces, and we are left with the original pattern and the traced internal lines. Once that is complete, we must multi-select the internal lines and convert them to cut marks. Now we have closed cut marks for all these sections. We drag and drop the different fabrics into the different sections of the calf pattern. Since the physics of the fabrics are supported with closed cut marks, we must dress the garment to allow it to simulate. We can see that the drape of the sock changes with the different fabric physics. If you'd like to learn more about creating seamless designs in VStitcher, check out our Spotlight video on seamless design linked below. Finally, we add and position the logo on the sock. If we don't want the image to be distorted, we can adjust the width of the image in the image editor so that on the 3D window it will look as intended. Just ensure that we have unlinked the dimensions before making the changes. Lastly, we check Use Lower Layer Map so that the texture of the fabric would also be applied on the logo. And there you have it, an easy way to create a pair of socks in VStitcher, the perfect way to complete your outfit. For more information, visit support.browseware.com.